Welcome to Call of Your Soul.
Welcome to Call Your Soul. My name is Dan Ellis with my co host Amy Bear and our special guest Ali Dye. And before we jump into today's content, just taking a moment to get centered. So I invite you, if you're in a place to do so, bring your body to stillness and bring your eyes to a close. And taking this moment just to connect to and feel the body. And feeling yourself prepare just to receive. And then on the next exhale, make it a little bit more complete. Starting at the belly, taking a big breath in. And exhale out. All right, so with us today is Ali Dye. And Ali is the co founder of Bridging Faith Gaps and also the co host of the podcast I Just Don't Understand. And welcome, Ali. Glad to have you today. And maybe to kick it off, if you could just give us a quick snapshot of what you're currently bringing to the world.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to have this opportunity to share some of the work that we're doing with Bridging Faith Gaps and maybe a little bit of what we're talking about on I Just Don't Understand, because it's kind of a intersectionality view of Southern culture, rural living, and religion. So a lot of different places that meet that people don't have a voice for. So very excited to be able to share some of that with y'all today. Um, the biggest thing right now is we're working on preparing for our third Thanksgiving meal here in Elberton. And I guess I'll talk about that a little bit later, but we're just trying to educate people and reach people and meet them where they are in Elberton and to provide a safe place for people to land, which hasn't always been the case in small rural communities.
Yeah, which is extremely critical. And maybe just for anyone who's unfamiliar, maybe just briefly a description for where Elberton and Elbert County is in relation to the U.S. and Georgia.
Absolutely. Elbert County is in northeast Georgia. I usually tell people if they can locate Athens, just head east, and we're on the South Carolina border.
Okay, got it.
Mhm.
And so you had mentioned before your experience in seminary school at the United Methodist Church really sort of had a big influence on your perspective in the world and what's sort of pulled you into this work. So maybe we'll take a little jump back in time and use that as our launch point, and maybe take us through what that experience was for you and how that stirred you, towards your current path today.
So I went to seminary because I was planning on being an ordained elder in the United Methodist Church. I got my call to seminary the end of my junior year in college and really just didn't quite understand what that meant. So after I graduated with my bachelor's degree, I did go get a master's of divinity and attended Duke University, Duke Divinity School, and it was an incredible experience. Even though I didn't go into the ordination route for the United Methodist Church, I have worked with the United Methodist Church for the past oh, 18 years, which is unbelievable. Uh, now that I think about it, I'm like, oh, good Lord. Um, so I have worked for the church as the music director, as a worship leader, and I also actually worked at two United Methodist churches at the same time as a youth director as well. So a lot of work in the church, just not going the ordination route. And that experience of going to seminary, learning about community, intentional Christian community, learning about social justice. I think I shared with you earlier that I am where I grew up now. I moved back here 18 years ago And so growing up here and in the congregation that I grew up in, which is also the church I work in, uh, we were very mission minded, but no one ever used the language of social justice. And then I get to seminary and I hear this language of social justice, and I'm really intrigued by that. And kind of learn and unpack what social justice is. My definition of social justice is looking at the root causes of why people can't live their most wholehearted, full life, whether it be poverty or hunger or homelessness or um, injustice or any of your isms, racism, sexism, ageism, and looking at the root cause of those. What is actually causing that issue to exist? And examining it and how we can fix it. So even though I didn't go into ordained ministry, I did go into public education. And a lot of the reason I went into that route was because for me, fixing a lot of those root causes of social justice is an issue of education. If we want to get people out of poverty, education is the fastest way to do that. If we want to get people out of homelessness, education is one of the fastest ways to do that on a permanent basis. There are a lot of people doing really great work to meet people where they are, which I mentioned earlier. And we're doing some of that work as well, but a lot of that is what I call a band-aid to a problem that requires triage. So yes, that work needs to be done as well, and still we need to get to some more root causes and how can we help people actually get out of situations they find themselves in. So seminary was really the first place where I heard that language and actually was like, okay, I get this now. I understand what needs to be done, not always how to do it.
Yeah.
Because it's really hard work.
Mm-hmm.
And it requires a lot of conversations and giving of time and resources. And even I'm learning now, since I'm not teaching anymore, how much it requires of making contact and connection with your politicians.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Which makes sense because a lot of these are, probably having to be policy driven,
Right.
and changing and enforcing laws relative to equality.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So before we go too much further, I'm really curious because, when I hear that you go through seminary and this degree just sounds cool to me, Masters of Divinity.
I know, I like to joke that I've mastered the divine. Really, I learned that I don't know anything. The more I studied, the more I was like, I do not.
Right? The study that you don't actually, you come to find out that you don't know
Right, that's the
anything.
greater wisdom.
Right?
Yeah.
So I'm surprised that there is actually this much of an emphasis. In one sense, I'm surprised, right? Because a lot of these are the teachings of Jesus, right?
Yes.
And so a lot of the teaching from him comes from the example of public service. But I'd like to just get like a broad scope, because that was one aspect. Like, what were the other aspects of your education and your degree?
Well, I want to back up a little bit because
Sure.
Duke is a Methodist school, United Methodist school. So if you know the United Methodist history, there's a huge focus on social holiness, but also how to help the community. That's why you have so many United Methodist hospitals, Duke, Emory, Vanderbilt, from the South, right off the bat. There's also a huge push on education. And so those are kind of the big names, at least in the South, but you also have a lot of smaller schools. I went to what was a 2-year school. It's now moved to a 4-year school. That was also a United Methodist school for my first 2 years of college. And so education, public health has always been a huge part of the United Methodist tradition, and what John Wesley did. So I love being part of that lineage because those are things that I'm passionate about as well. But to go back and answer your question, a big part of what else I studied that just kind of opened my mind to a lot of things is I kind of focused on Christian education because I knew working with youth was going to be a big part of my life, and it was, and it hopefully still is, even though I'm not teaching anymore. So I did some Christian education classes, but the ones that really formed and shaped my views of things, I would say, were my feminist theology class. And then I took several classes in race and reconciliation. And that gave me a framework to use when I looked at issues of growing up in rural South, where racism is still a big, huge issue.
Yeah.
I actually had a panic attack in one of my classes because it just dredged up so many memories of things that I had experienced growing up here that I had pushed aside. And so it really focused my attention on, okay, there are still major issues of racism in rural communities, especially. I think they probably exist everywhere, but when you live in a small town like I do, sometimes it's more obvious because everybody has to work together in order for things to be achievable. So, and you really start examining the relationships between people, how Black folks in rural communities have been treated, and what I've done, some of the work I've done this summer has really been listening to stories that have never been shared as part of our history in this it's a large county, but a small town. And so growing up, and I think Amy probably, I don't want to put words in her mouth, but probably had some of the same experiences.
Yeah,
Growing up,
100%.
you learn a lot about Elbert County history, but it's very white history. You learn about Stephen Hurd and the Beverly Plantation and Nancy Hart, but you don't ever hear about influential Black folks who made a difference, not just in this area, but in the world. And I learned some of those stories this summer, and I moved back here 18 years ago. So sometimes I'm dumbfounded that I'm missing such a large view of the history of this area that I grew up in.
Yeah, I'm curious, Allie, would you like to just, just quickly kind of mention a few of those influential Black people and just kind of a general view of what they might have done?
Absolutely. One of them that I learned about back in February was William Hurd, who was born into slavery and got his freedom through emancipation and the Civil War. But he went on to be a bishop in the AME Church, which is the African Episcopal Methodist Church. And so not only did he start churches here in America and achieve the bishop level, he actually went and started churches in Ghana as well. I had never heard that story, and I had to study Methodist history. Like I can tell you Richard Allen started the AME church. Like I can tell you all of that, right? But I never knew that there was a connection so early in the start of that church to where I grew up, which was incredible. This summer, I led a book study talking about shame and shame resilience and the Black experience. And I partnered with our public library to lead that book study. And it was incredible the stories I heard. And one of the stories I heard from that was um, I taught music and chorus for the majority of my teaching career. And so when I would teach my American music history class, I would teach about the Chitlin Circuit, because you cannot have the popular music we have today without the influence of African music, and Black music, especially from the South with the blues and the spirituals. It just would not exist. And
Yeah.
so, I'm teaching about those genres and how they have developed, and I'm teaching about something called the Chitlin Circuit, where if chitlins were on the menu of this area, then you knew that was a safe place as a Black performer that you could perform. And I'm teaching it in terms of it's in Columbus, Georgia, with Ma Rainey and the theaters that she ran. I'm teaching that it's in the Mississippi Delta. And this summer, I found out that it was here in Elberton. We
Mhm.
had a cafe, um, and I'm going to get the name wrong, the Blue Diamond Lounge or the Blue something Lounge.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was on the Chitlin Circuit. And so James Brown performed here,
Wow.
and Stevie Wonder came through. And so I got to interview someone who played with James Brown when he was in Elberton this summer. And that was just an incredible experience. And I did not know that our Black community had such a powerful community, influential community here. So I've just learned all this stuff, and I don't know that I would have that passion and that drive to learn more about social justice or issues of racism and be able to look at it and deconstruct some of those the walls that we put up around it, um, if I had not done the work in seminary.
Mm.
Yeah, and really learning how like influential Elbert County was like in the circuit, and then the gentleman that contributed to the African Episcopal Church. Like there's actually quite a significance and contribution there. I'm sorry, Amy, you wanted to
Well, I was
contribute
just
something?
thinking of someone that I've met several times, who is an attorney here in town, and he is really powerful. I think he has practiced all areas of law because he is a black man who represents this community, so he has had to represent all aspects of the law, which I think is just unbelievable. To be that diverse and have that kind of capacity. I think that's amazing. And I believe that his daughter, I'm not sure if she's an attorney, but I'm pretty sure she wrote a book. I feel like I read it a few years ago, but obviously I should go back and reread it. Um, but it was a really interesting book for me to. I think it was a book, but yeah, I learned a lot from that, and I was really glad that that connection was there for me.
Yeah, his daughter
Yeah.
is an attorney. They practice together actually, but yeah, the person that she's talking about is John Clark,
Yeah,
and he was super influential during the civil rights movement as well. So there's just so much richness to the people who live here,
yeah.
and their stories aren't shared.
Yeah. And it's really interesting because, the civil rights movement really wasn't that long ago.
No, it
You
wasn't.
know,
It
it
was
really
not.
wasn't.
No.
It really was not at all. And I think sometimes, especially with like younger people, there's not because there may be still two generations, removed, but it was a very, very short time ago, especially when you think about the with respect to the span of time in humanity. And Al, I have one question. So you mentioned, Duke and Vanderbilt, I believe those are both private universities, and they have like affiliation with United Methodist Church or with the Methodist
Yes,
Church.
they were founded as United or as Methodists. The United Methodists didn't merge until the 60s. But they were founded as Methodist universities. Yes.
Hmm.
Wow. Okay, and those are like top universities, in the whole
Yes.
country. Yeah, especially Duke for medical,
Hmm.
and Vanderbilt for many courses of study. So that's pretty fascinating.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then Emory has the Buddhist monks who practice there and are, I guess, they're professors, but they have a lot of influence in Emory University.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, how did you end up going from? Well, I guess it's sort of a logical transition, when you talked about the importance of the education piece that came from your seminary studies. But I guess just take us through, you're finishing up seminary school and then deciding what to do next in life, and then, how you chose what you chose.
So the Methodist Church is very hierarchy driven. So if you want to be an elder, you have to meet with your pastor. Then your church kind of recommends you and says, yes, we've seen the gifts of this person. So my church did all of that. And then you have to meet with your district superintendent. So I was in the process of meeting with my district superintendent and meeting with the district. We call it the DCOM board. So people who sit around and ask you theological questions and about your call and all that kind of stuff. So I was meeting with my district superintendent, and I had done multiple, we call them field ed placements. So you're assigned to a church or a nonprofit, and you're able to work alongside a pastor to see, is this something you really like and enjoy doing? And so I had worked at two different churches over the summers and done all that requirement. And I'd also worked with the Duke Wesley Fellowship, which is the campus ministry for the United Methodist Church, and absolutely loved working with campus ministry. So I came back and I met with my district superintendent and I said, I really don't have the gifts to work with a local congregation. I don't want to do that.
Mhm.
Um, but I would love to be in campus ministry. And he was like, well, you're going to have to bide your time like everybody else and go into local ministry, which just sounded awful. um,
So, what does that mean?
so,
Like, instead of going into a congregation, you go to local
so
ministry,
local congregation would be like a local church.
right?
So I've been working with a local church for 18 years, but I'm just in the capacity of music. Like I don't have to preach every Sunday. I don't have to go visit people in the hospital, that kind of stuff. So local ministry is that you have to do those types of things, whether it's visiting people that are sick or homeless or in nursing homes or the preaching every Sunday or um, doing Bible studies with the local congregation, that kind of stuff, which there's a place for it, obviously, and it's important work, but it's not work that I necessarily felt called to.
Mhm.
And part of that is because of my passion for social justice, I really struggle with dealing with adults. This is probably why I started working with youth, but I really struggle dealing with adults who want to argue about how many light bulbs have to be out before you hire a lift to come in and change the light bulbs in the vaulted ceilings, or are going to fight over the color of the carpet when there are
Mm.
people on the streets who are hungry.
Yeah.
Um, uh, we have, and this is one of my big arguments right now with the church, my home church, is that we have a picture of what I call white Jesus
Mhm.
hanging up, and people don't want it to be taken down, even though I find it offensive if we have people of color come into our sanctuary. So, like, I just, don't have the patience to deal with those kind of arguments.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I do love teaching and the art and craft of teaching. I do love people asking really hard conversation or really hard questions about theology. I actually love giving people space to question and doubt their faith because I think when you wrestle with it, you come out stronger.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I love that part of it, but I don't love the rest of it. So when he told me, "Oh, you're just going to have to bide your time and serve in a local congregation," it just went against the fiber of my being.
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
so I went back to Duke and sat down with a mentor and talked about what are the elements that you love about campus ministry. And I loved working with youth, even though I wasn't that far away from their age at that point. Uh, but I loved working with youth. I loved the educational component because people were coming to Wesley to learn more. They weren't under their parents' thumbs anymore. They could ask questions. They genuinely wanted to know more and develop spiritual practices for themselves. So it was just great time of learning. And when I sat down with her and went through those kind of elements of why do you like campus ministry so much, it came back to education. And I said, okay, my undergrad's in music education, so it's not that big of a leap. So what are you going to do now that you don't want to be ordained an elder? And so it was a big process of discernment for me. And I looked at, okay, you can go into youth ministry. You can go into private school education because with a master's of divinity, you could definitely get into a Christian private school with no issues, or you can go into public school. And for me, if I'm going to be true to my call and my passion for social justice, the best option is public school.
Mm.
Um, children who are children who are involved in um, church and come to youth ministry events have parents that are involved in their lives. Same thing with private schools, generally speaking. But you have so many kids who need someone to love them in public education. So at the end of the day, working in a Title One school, Dan, I don't know if you need me to under explain what a Title One school is, but
I know what it is, but just to clarify for anybody else who may not be familiar.
yeah, yeah. So a Title One school is a designation by the federal government that states that a certain percentage of your school population is in poverty. So for Elbert County, in my last couple of years teaching, our our students, over 80% of them lived in poverty.
Mm. Wow.
Jesus.
Yeah. So, and there are different levels of Title One type schools, but ours was a fully immersive Title One school, meaning that we got federal dollars to help with supports, um, making class sizes smaller, doing remediation work, giving resources for parents, and that type of thing. So,
Mm.
so looking at those types of situations was super important to me. Even when I've applied to other schools, I've looked to see if they are Title One schools,
Uh-huh.
even if they're not, um, maybe not quite the same level as Elbert County, but that's still something that's important to me.
Mhm. Wow.
And you had answered my question, of why you chose the public school, and at the core of it is because that's where the need is, right? And that's where there is the biggest need to have input and change. and to make an impact in the kids' lives because they don't have the resources and support that you may get in a in a Christian private school. And so like your bandwidth to be able to have impact is definitely greatest in that sphere, despite it probably being immensely more challenging, I imagine.
Oh, yes. The lack of parental support is obvious. The lack of resources, obvious. So many of our students don't know what they don't know, to be quite honest.
Yeah.
And for a long time, I would say probably the last 5 years of my teaching career, it was if I don't expose them to this, who will?
Mm-hmm.
If I don't give them the resources to establish, and this was outside of teaching notes on a page, but if I don't give them the resources to establish healthy boundaries and uh, how to, and this was really, really hard, but for some of them, how to say no to their parents once they turned 18 and they had goals and ambitions and drive and were successful, then their parents would come back and try to either take the money that they had made or even try to get them back into the situation because their parents didn't want to see them be more successful,
Mm-hmm.
Gosh.
which
Yeah.
wasn't how I was raised. So that was really shocking to me, right? So, and I'll share this story. I had a student. The chorus always sang at the Elbert 12 County Fair, and so we would get in for free. Our students would get in for free, and one of their parents would get in for free. But I had a student who had gotten a laptop for Christmas, and so this would have been the next October. Her parents pawned off the laptop
God.
Mm-hmm.
to bring her to the fair, even though they got into free. So it's just that kind of situation that you're in and navigating and trying to teach them skills that they're not getting at home, but also teach them the education components and the knowledge components. And it can be very hard work. It is very hard work.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's like instead of, because the old adage is so true. And now, I'm going through it firsthand, with a child now entering middle school. It really takes a village and a community to raise a child. You need so many aspects of support, so many different resources, to give a child what they need for them to really bloom and discover who they are and develop their strengths and to work on their weaknesses. And so, the situation that you worked through for 17 years was like, you've got you and maybe a little bit of help from the public school with some of their resources. And it sounds like, that ended up sort of being pulled back, and then you were told, no, we're not going to do this, and no, you're not going to teach that, which sort of ran aground, your relationship with them. And it's just been really interesting to watch the whole environment of public education change since I was in school, and now it's so much electronic.
Mm-hmm.
So over almost 2 decades, as we kind of dive into this, I'm just curious to hear from the inside how you've seen the public education system change, from when you first started to when you left.
So I think one of the biggest changes I've seen is the lack of trust between parents and
Mm,
teachers. And I would also say students and teachers. Um, and I can't pinpoint a moment where that shift happened. But if let's say I had an issue with a student and I called home, a lot of times the parent, and what I didn't know, especially early in my career, is that a lot of times the parent brings their own trauma from
Yeah.
school,
mm,
especially if they weren't successful in school or had discipline problems in school. They bring that own trauma, which I'm not aware of as their child's teacher. So one of the things that I really had to work on was establishing rapport with parents and reminding them that we want what's best for your child. All of us sitting in this room, if we're at a parent teacher conference, all of us sitting here want your child to be successful. we are on the same team. So trying to develop that rapport was super important. I also um, I saw a huge shift after
Mm,
COVID. There's a lot of blame that could go around and pointing fingers. I don't think that's helpful talk because we didn't know what we were going through. We had not done online teaching before. That's not helpful. So, getting back into the groove of holding students accountable to get the work done has been really difficult because they were given a slide, an opportunity not to do when we were in COVID and lockdown and doing online instruction. So, that was a big, huge shift. And that changed the way I related to students and how I talked to students. And I was very intentional about changing the way I taught because of COVID. And that's when I started bringing in a lot more social emotional learning in particular because they did not know how to process their emotions. A lot of my students, especially because I was working at that point uh, with sixth grade through 12th grade, a lot of the high school seniors, especially, had a lot of anger because their senior year was taken away from
Mhm.
them. Their prom was canceled, their graduation was canceled. We have traditions, uh, or we had traditions within the chorus program where the seniors got to have a special moment on stage at the end of their last concert and talk about what they had learned from chorus and how they had benefited from it, and they get recognized for their service and dedication to the program, and that was taken away from them.
Mm.
Uh, I would always sing a song to them as a kind of a graduation going away present, and they were mad because they didn't get a song from Miss Di. So knowing that our students just did not know how to emotionally regulate
Yeah.
was important. And so those were conversations I started having in my classes when we finally came back from lockdown. And I think those are super important because I think those are life skills that a lot of people need, not just middle schoolers and high schoolers. But it wasn't always met with enthusiasm. It wasn't part of my standards.
right.
So I was reprimanded for teaching them sometimes.
Yeah. Well, and it is such an important thing. I mean, to find peace inside of yourself, to have relationships that are satisfying, it's really essential to understand how to process emotions. And that can be so difficult, for anyone. And I mean, even someone who, I mean, I'm certified with Heart Math Institute, who, that's a big part of their focus. It's not the only focus, but that's a big part of it is, what is, what's the, really the technique, if you will, for, processing emotion, with breath and intention and attention and, knowing when to step back and recenter, these kinds of things. And they have programs that are for little kids and then programs for, kids that I think there's four different ones. And there's one for teenagers and then one for adults. And I just find that it's difficult for a lot of people to imagine that that's important in a school as if it should be taught elsewhere. But I'm not sure how parents who haven't learned that are going to teach or model that for their kids.
Right. Breath work can be life saving.
Yeah.
And that's me speaking from experience of doing some breath work with a
Yeah.
counselor and giving students a safe place to explore that,
Mhm.
to ask questions, to and this is work that I've had to do as well, but to be in their body and to
Yeah.
feel what they feel and to have awareness of that. And I was able to do a lot of that in chorus because our body is our instrument.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And if you are residing in anxiety and tension, if you're holding tension in your body, that affects your sound.
Yeah.
that may not be a huge issue for a middle schooler. As you get older and you're not able to be in your body, it does create even more issues with inflammation and
Dissociation.
yes, exactly.
Yeah, there's a part of the curriculum now. Our daughter does go to a private school, and honestly, this is probably at least half of the reason why
Hmm.
we did this, because she's very artistic and very sensitive, and so they call it SEL, social emotional
Hmm.
learning, where they have a mental health professional,
Yep.
and depending on what the class needs and any like acute issues and what specific students need in terms of support. It's a lot of teaching these elements, right? How to self-regulate, and then bringing awareness like to
Hmm.
relational conflicts, especially as they're going through crucial stages of development. And I remember you saying before, like how important of a focus you made on safety, not just physical safety, but mental and emotional safety, to have an environment such that is conducive to learning. Otherwise, if a kid doesn't feel safe, they're shut down and they're not going to be able to learn.
Hmm.
And so, first of all, just wanted to commend you for bringing that to your classroom. And I just kind of find it really disappointing and insane that you were reprimanded for doing so. But maybe just kind of talk about like how you would set that in the classroom, and how you sort of established the framework, and then maybe held accountability for when that was challenged by some of the kids.
So the very first week of school, I never ever taught any notes. There was no music teaching going on. It was about building trust and relationships. So right off the bat, I would do a values lesson with them. And so we talked about things that were important to us in terms of what is it that we value. And I had a little PowerPoint slide that I would do, and I'd put up um, which thing brings you more value, is more important to you. And so I would have like a Reese cup on one side and one of like the gold coin chocolates on another side. Well, the majority of the kids are going to the Reese cup, right? It's going to be better. It's going to taste better. Um, on another slide, I would have, and the kids would walk to which side of the room that they valued more. On one slide, I would have a um, Nike Air Force tennis shoe, and the other side of the slide, I would have um, Adidas or something that's not quite as fashion forward for middle schoolers,
Right.
because it's all about the Jordans.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
um, but just to give them an idea of some things have more value, more worth, right? And we usually talk about value in terms of money, but there are other things that are valuable that cannot be reduced to a monetary value. So then I'd have things, pictures up in the four corners of my room. And so I'd have a picture of a house. I would have a picture of a family. I would have a picture of a school, and I would have a picture of a money sign. And I would ask my students, okay, out of these four things, what do you value the most? What is the most important thing to you? And the majority of them would go to the family first. And I said, okay, what's your second? And then they would all move to the house. And I say, what was your third? Then they usually go to
Mhm.
money. School was always their last one for some
Oh,
reason. I know,
Yeah.
right? But it was my first one. It because I love learning. I consider myself a lifelong learner. Learning is one of my top tier values. But when we did that and we started talking about what are the characteristics of family that you really, really like, it's not perfect. It's never going to be perfect. But what are those characteristics? Why do some of you choose the house first? And they started talking about, well, I feel safe with my family. I feel like I can be my true self with my family. I like the house because it provides me a safe place, whether it's in my own bedroom where I can be alone or because I trust my family members. So I said, okay, how do we bring that to our classroom?
mm,
So if you walk through my classroom doors, how is it that you're going to feel safe and protected? And like you can trust the people sitting around you. So we talked about, because one of the things that people miss when we talk about values is that they have to be actionable. There has to be an action that you can see, hear, feel that's associated with that value. So if our value is going to be safety, what is it that we are doing? I mean, and it could be something silly like we're not running around the classroom chasing each other because you could trip and fall and hit your head on one of the chairs, right? I didn't have desks since I was teaching chorus, but I had chairs that were loose. And so you could literally get hurt by doing that. So we want to talk about physical safety. If someone is visibly upset and you go up and you say, hey, you look sad, do you want to talk about it? And they say no, respecting that boundary
Mm-hmm.
that they just set. You don't have to keep pushing them and be like, tell me what's going on. What's going on? You wait until they come to you so that they have time to process it. And then if they feel like they can trust you with whatever's going on, they will. So having those conversations took time, but it also created a really safe place for my students to be risk takers.
Mm.
And I think that's one of the biggest things that we're missing in education, that students are too scared or fearful to be creative
Yeah.
Yeah.
because they're scared of the judgment.
Well, and the nervous system just doesn't allow us to process learning um, when it's in a state of fight, flight, freeze, shutdown. I, how are you going to learn? I mean, it's just the focus is not there, and that's just a physiological truth. So,
Yeah.
it really seems so very basic to help generate a sense of safety.
You would think so, but it doesn't.
And I have to give you some credit here,
Yeah,
Allie.
right.
Um, it was pretty genius the way
Yeah.
that you taught that, because if I go in as a teacher on day one and I say, all right, we're gonna have a safe environment here, and you sort of walk them through it, there's no real buy-in, and I don't think they have the experience for themselves of discovering how important that is. But you take them through an exercise, almost like performing an inception on them, where they find out for themselves how important safety is, right? By
Mm-hmm.
finding where that environment is and why that's important. And then you wrap back to, we're going to do our best to recreate that here, and I'm going to support you doing it. And we need buy in from everybody to help create this environment such that we now have the ability to be able to take some risks and be able to be creative and embrace some sense of vulnerability, to have our greatest aptitude for learning. So I just want to say, like, that's how I know you're a good teacher. That was
Mhm.
really brilliant and well
Mhm.
done.
Well, and I think back to when I worked in a mental health institution with troubled teenagers, and I really loved that work. I loved being helpful and watching them expand and grow. But I think about how that particular exercise just would have been so powerful there. And it just wasn't something that I knew about, or apparently those who were really in charge of creating the program either didn't know how to do that or didn't value it enough to do it. It would have been so powerful.
Well, when I started doing this work, I actually started doing some SEL work in 2019 because I was doing a curriculum that I wrote myself, that I developed myself, and I named it Voices from the Margins. So we only did songs that were written by marginalized people. And we talked about
Mhm.
why music was a vessel for these people to use in order to get their voices heard. So we did African American spirituals, we did women composers, we did a LGBTQ composer. So, but I pulled in other people that had been marginalized and their voices had been silenced throughout history. And we looked at those people and how they continued to fight for their voice to be heard. And I saw such a transformation with my students doing that. And the reason I had to bring in SEL is because we had to talk about empathy. And no
Mm.
one had ever introduced them to empathy and what that meant. So I had to, the values lessons kind of expanded out of that conversation around empathy and being able to see another perspective and be able to understand why someone was trying to silence another voice or why people wanted their voices to be heard in the first place.
Yeah.
And it was such a beautiful experience uh, doing that and seeing how empowered my students felt. So, one of the things that was super important to me, especially in middle school, was I wanted my classes to be the most diverse classes in the entire building. And they were for the most part. And so if I have students that are sitting in my classroom that are white and black and Hispanic and Asian, then I want them to be able to see themselves reflected in the music we do.
Mm-hmm.
So in doing that, but specifically pulling out marginalized voices, I saw my black students become empowered, that their voice mattered and their voice needed to be heard. I saw my girls in those classes say, okay, like I don't have to live in typical gender norms. If something interests me and I love it, then I need to do it regardless of who thinks what. So it was really an important pivotal moment in my class to see how much it empowered students to have these conversations.
Yeah, that is incredibly powerful. I mean, I can see, I can imagine, but to really be there and witness that happening must have been just so gratifying and, yeah, empowering for you too
Yes.
in your teachership.
Yeah, and I think it's so important, especially for the population that you're working with, because you talked about the challenges that you experience with the family members and the parents, sometimes actively like suppressing or silencing or um,
Mm,
sabotaging, the growth and
Yes.
evolution of the kids. So it's like they're having a real life experience of that in their community. And so you're showing them that this is not an uncommon thing, that this has somehow been
Yes.
normalized in the history of your people, and you're giving them a path forward, um, which is, like you said, empowering. Like the word and the theme that was coming so clearly as you're explaining that was empowering. And I think that's one of the most important aspects of education, especially the population that you're working with, right, is like 5th through 12th grade. That's where you're really embracing your sense of individuality and discovering what it is that you do uniquely well and bring to the world. And so empowerment is such I feel like a crucial piece to that.
I have to share this. My students, so we started that unit, that study in January of 2019, and my students came to me in February and said, "We don't feel like we do enough for Black History
mm,
Month." Because the only thing that was happening at that point
Hmm.
in time is there were some posters for Black history outside of the cafeteria. That was it. So the students met with me and was like, "What can we do?" And I was like, "You need to go talk to the principal." And they went and talked to the principal about we would like to have a Black History moment during announcements every morning where we highlight somebody who has done some incredible work contributing to humanity.
beautiful.
And I loved it,
Yeah.
and she agreed, and I kind of oversaw and made sure that um, somebody was there to do the morning announcements and that they had already written their little 3 to 4 sentence summary of that person. Well, when they went to the high school wasn't doing anything, and they took it to the high school principal and said, "We want you to do this," which I loved, and that was super beneficial. So we continued that on into Women's History Month. And in my own classroom, I my last year I also included Hispanic
Mm-hmm.
Heritage Month, and so like my students saw that I wanted to celebrate diversity and be inclusive of everyone, which I also love. It's just part of who I am. And um, so I stopped teaching 2 years ago, and this year my best friend still teaches, and so she said we had an SEL meeting last week, and I said, you did? Usually that's a little triggering for me because a lot of times SEL wasn't social emotional learning, it was how to control behavior. And so
Mm-hmm.
I was
Yeah.
always like,
Hmm.
and she's like, we have a student government board this year that's new, and their advisor asked them, what do you want to see in your school? And they actually said, we want to see more recognition of Black History Month and Women's History Month and uh, Hispanic Heritage Month and Pacific Islander Month. And I was like, I'm going to take credit for those little eighth graders.
I was gonna say that sounds like your
she's,
impression on the
and she's
kids
like,
coming to
I
life.
don't know if they were your students or not. I said, I don't care. I had an influence somewhere.
Absolutely. That's wonderful. And it's like
Yeah,
they felt empowered to have the idea and to bring it forward. And I love that. That's an amazing thing.
that's been the majority of my focus. I'll share this with you. Especially with my high schoolers, I did a little project with them called the One Sentence Project, and it comes from a New York Times journalist who was interviewing JFK, and the journalist told JFK, "You're trying to do too much. The most influential presidents or people in history that we've had, their lives can be summarized in 1 to 2 sentences." And so they said, if you take Abraham Lincoln, you can summarize his life with he freed the slaves and unified the country. If you take uh, FDR, he got the nation out of the Great Depression and helped lead lead us to victory in World War II, right?
Hmm.
So like you're instead of having like a summary, you want to have an essay. So narrow it down. So I did this with my students in terms of what do you want people to be able to say about you? And my rule was I don't ask you to do anything in my classroom that I'm not doing with you or have not done before. Like we're going to do this together. And I told them, I said my one sentence, if I can summarize it, would be she empowered her students to use their voice.
Mm.
And I love
Hmm.
that because yes, we're singing together, we're sharing um, and making beautiful art together. But beyond that, your voice is powerful. Speak up for yourself. Speak up for others that don't have your privilege. So that's kind of been a driving force for me the past 6 years or so.
That's a beautiful statement. I love that statement. One of the things that has been on my mind a fair bit is, as a country, we have a Department of War. I don't think we have a Department of Peace. And for me, the Department of
Mm,
Peace would be, all the way from global relations to, friends, family, neighbors, coworkers, and to internal peace within.
mm-hmm.
And those would be, you know, the focuses. And it just seems really important.
I and the older I get, the more I appreciate peace.
Yeah.
I had every single year I was teaching, period. I had a poster, it was actually a flag that I got from a fair trade store, and it had peace in about 6 different languages
Mm.
written on it. And it was always something I could look at and center myself. Because, like you, I want to have an internal peace, and it took me a long time to get there. And some days are still better than others.
Sure.
Um, but I also want that for my students. And so being able to give them space to, I can't really, some of them talked about their trauma in my class. And I was very upfront about we're not comparative of our traumas. Trauma is trauma. But we also, if another student is willing to share this with us as a class, then we are most certainly not going out in public and talking about it.
Yeah.
And I was very, very upfront with that. And I saw this beautiful community happen when we were able to search for that peace and to provide encouragement and belonging
Hmm.
to each other, which was incredible. And of course, that happened more at the high school level where they were able to um, conceptually understand what was going on a little bit better than middle schoolers.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. That's amazing work. So important. And we're not talking, to me, I mean, I'm not talking about peace that's superficial, like, the top of the water is always flat.
Mm-hmm.
It's a peace in depth where I can have different internal voices that have different thoughts and different feelings and viewpoints, even just inside myself, and how to be at peace with that, and certainly then that expands to being able to be at peace with voices outside yourself. And
Yes.
so we're not talking about a peace that's flat or superficial, but actually an ability to be in relationship.
Mm-hmm.
So, Allie, in the spirit of finding your internal peace, and it's interesting how you had quite a lot of challenges, not only with the parents and the school board, and I imagine probably even sometimes with your colleagues and other teachers. Maybe give us a little bit of a glimpse of the healing process that you needed to go through as you came to the end of your tenure in the public school setting.
So, with my work on SEL, and specifically talking about shame and how our students experience shame, because poverty creates shame as well. So, and there's generational trauma with poverty. So, trying to give them space to kind of unpack that and have an awareness of it. Then, with the Voices from the Margins project, where I'm bringing up marginalized voices, I was called into the principal's office, both at the middle school and the high school, multiple times. um, One of our assistant superintendents actually told me there was a complaint from a parent because I talk about racial inequality too much. And for me, if we're doing an African American spiritual, then we have to talk about the reasoning that genre even exists. And in doing that, I want students to understand that this was ingenuity at its finest to get your message across, to get your voice heard, um, in a place where you're wanting freedom and liberation, right? So I can't justify doing an African American spiritual without talking about racial inequality.
Yeah.
If I do, and we just sing the notes on the page, which was what was told to me, then it's called cultural appropriation. And that's also an issue, right? So having to be mindful of that, and Georgia, the reason he brought that up to me and I was reprimanded for it is because Georgia passed a divisive concepts bill, and Georgia's is very broad compared to other places like Tennessee and Oklahoma
Mhm.
and Florida. But pretty much anything that makes a student uncomfortable, we're not supposed to teach.
Wow.
And in my opinion, education should make you uncomfortable. You should be outside of your comfort zone in order to grow, to learn. And a lot of people associate this, I'm glad we talked about safety earlier. A lot of people associate it with being unsafe. You can learn about things that make you uncomfortable in a safe manner,
Yeah.
in a place that doesn't jeopardize even your mental or emotional safety. But in order to really grow and talk about empathy and to have a better understanding of people who are different than you, then you're going to be uncomfortable. So I had to deal with that coming from the administration, and I really, because of that, because of the demands of my job. And so, like I said earlier, I was teaching 6th through 12th grade chorus. I was running a middle school program that at the time, at our largest, we had over 180 kids in. We had over 20% of the school in the chorus program before COVID, and a high school class, which had its own like programming things with after school rehearsals and weekend events and getting kids ready for auditions, because I did have students that went on to college to perform. It's just incredibly time consuming. And because of my demands of my job and because I consider myself a recovering perfectionist, um, I went through a really big battle with anxiety, never feeling like I could ever get anything done, that it wasn't good enough, and which cycled into depression. And I hit a wall. I won't lie about that at all. Um, I would wake up in the middle of the night with anxiety attacks. So on average, I would get maybe 3 to 4 hours of sleep a night. And when I hit that wall, my best friend was finally like, "Okay, Allie, you've got to do something else." And so I was in a 7th grade chorus class teaching. I was standing up, and I had an anxiety attack in the middle of class. And of course, I don't want to panic my students, so I just go around behind the piano and I sit down and take some deep breaths. And at that moment, I knew I needed to do something different.
Yeah.
So I did go to the doctor that afternoon, and I did get on medication, which helped with the sleeping in particular, but also just helped ease my mind in terms of that constant voice in your head that you're not good enough. Nothing that you ever do is going to be good enough. Um, and gave me being on medication gave me some space to actually deal with some of the reasons and the root causes behind the anxiety and depression. And so I started doing a lot of this work that I've done with students. I started doing it on my own before I ever did it with students. And that brought me to really identify what are your core values? What is it that you're going to stand by when things get tough? What is important to you and how you navigate your life? And like I said earlier, your values have to be actionable. So I'm also looking at what am I doing in my life that this can back up. And my top 2 tier values, and this was years of work. Like a lot of people think that you can just be like, oh, these are the things I value and just go with it. I mean, these were constantly being nuanced and changed, and talking with close friends and looking at what I want to prioritize in my life. But my top 2 values, it came down to faith. My faith is very important to me, in that it is through the lens of my faith in the gospel of Jesus Christ that I understand why belonging is so important, that I understand um, why inclusion should be something that every single church strives for, why looking at social injustices and being a social justice warrior is important. So, faith was number one. And then my second was learning. I love learning. Like, even my vacations are learning. So it doesn't matter if I go to the Pacific Northwest and I'm visiting national parks and I'm in my little notebook I carry with me, I'm drawing descriptions of the type of volcanoes that are there. Or I did a vacation a couple of summers ago that was all civil rights minded. So we traveled throughout the southeast and went to civil rights places, Montgomery, Birmingham, Little Rock, Arkansas, Memphis, um, and I love learning that way, the experiential learning concept. And so when I looked at what I value, setting up belonging in my classroom, safety in my classroom, looking at learning and even making myself uncomfortable, like I mentioned earlier, I looked at what we're doing in our local public education. I will not say this is across the board, but our local public education system. And belonging definitely is not something they value. And I would argue that learning is not something they value because I think learning can look a lot of different ways. I think testing and data is something that they value.
Mm-hmm.
And I think compliance is the other value. They don't really want kids to understand the concepts of respect. They just want them to do what they've been told because an adult told you so.
Mm-hmm.
And I took a moment and was like, this is not what education looks like to me. And all the time and energy that I put into my job, because I love my job, and this was the dream job. When I decided to become a music education major, the dream was to come back to Elbert County and to start a chorus program. Because we did not have a chorus program when I grew up here. I was a band kid because that was the only music education we had here. There was a chorus program, but then they completely cut it during the 2008 recession. And I was teaching 8th grade language arts and Georgia history at that point. And I was just waiting for the chorus teacher that was at the middle school to retire. And then they cut elementary music, they cut the high school chorus program completely, they cut the middle school chorus program completely, but kept her on to teach general music. And I was like, okay, I've been waiting my time for this position because this was the dream job. And when the chorus director decided that she was going to retire, since they weren't going to allow her to have a chorus program, and I moved into the music position, I told them, I only want this job if I'm going to be able to start a chorus program. And the principal at the time was supportive of that. And I did. And it grew larger than they ever imagined, um, which was great and wonderful. And God was so involved in that. And I loved it. I loved working with the kids, right? But over the course of the decade, I did it a little over a decade, just expectations of what was important to the school changed, leadership changed. And so I had to look at, do I want to keep and continue putting this time and effort into my classroom when I feel so handicapped by what I can and cannot do. Because I seriously was having some kind of talking to multiple times a year because I wanted my students to see themselves in my curriculum, because I wanted my students to have a sense of belonging, because I wanted my students to be able to understand how shame impacts their lives because of where we're growing up. They're growing up because I grew up here too, right? So I talked to my family and decided that it was time to say goodbye. And, Amy, you brought up the sense of peace. I had such a sense of peace and release when I
Mm,
resigned.
yeah.
And I was really nervous. Like I said, my best friend still teaches. I was really nervous when school went back into session that I would have this sense of longing and miss it desperately. And all I felt was peace.
Yeah.
So it was the right decision. um, and I took a lot of time for my own healing. So I've had a year of not teaching, and this has started my second year of not teaching. And last fall, I just took time for healing, rest. It took me for me there was a lot of trauma that went along with teaching that a lot of people don't know about, and it took me until October of last year. So I resigned. My contract ended June 1st. It took me until October to stop having nightmares about school.
Gosh.
So last fall was a lot about just taking time for myself, healing, doing things I enjoy. I'm a big crafter. I have lots of crafting hobbies. So being able to read again and craft and play on some digital designs, it was just nice to have that space. And then in January, I started doing a lot more with Bridging Faith Gaps. And
Before we dive there, I just curious what the response was, because you were such an integral part of the community, especially for those that resonated with the topics of empowering children
mhm.
and social justice, and especially music and chorus. So, like, what was the response that you got, from the community, especially like the students that were really invested with you, like once you said, I have to step away?
I did not tell students until after our spring concert because I wanted the spring concert to be about our high school seniors.
Yeah.
So I don't know what the community at large parent feeling was about that, but I can tell you what my students and former students' feelings were. Um, my current students were devastated, and there were lots of tears involved when I told them that I was not coming back. Um, and the teachers fussed at me for sending crying students back to their classroom.
Mhm.
What an inconvenience, Allie.
I know.
Wow. Yeah.
um, Most of the teachers, because I've been in the same school for 17 years. Most of the teachers were either jealous that I was doing this or called me a traitor. So
Oh,
Oh.
kind of
Oh.
ran the gamut there. I mean, most of them have been supportive and they understand. What's been the most interesting are my former students, especially the ones that went through fifth grade to 12th grade with me. And um, most of them are so happy that I quit.
mm,
Mm.
That was so weird. But they knew and they saw how draining it was for me. And they saw the lack of support from the administration. because we got no money from the Board of Education at all. So all the music, any equipment, unless it came out of Title IV monies, we had to fundraise ourselves. So they had seen the lack of support. So and these were students that had done things that had never been done in Elbert County before. These were students that had gotten solos at District Honors Choir or had placed at the state literary meet, right? So these were the students that were doing the above and beyond type things, and they didn't get recognized for the work that they did. And so they knew I didn't get recognized for the work that I did. So most of them were, it's time.
Yeah.
And they've been so supportive. And so when I see them, I keep in contact with a lot of those students. And when I see them, they comment on how much happier and lighter I look and feel. So they know and they understand and they're supportive. Some of them are now involved in BFG, which is really cool. Some of them that have graduated. So, I miss my students. That's the hardest part of saying goodbye to them. But at the same time, I knew it was time to do something else um, because there's so much more I can give. Yeah.
Yeah, and there was so much
Go ahead, Amy.
information with the peace that you felt.
Yes.
Being at peace is, yeah, strong confirmation. Did you have a vision when you quit, or did you just like, I'm just quitting and then I'll see what comes?
Yes and no. Like, I mean, I had applied for other chorus jobs. I'd had an interview at another school in North Georgia. I didn't get it, and then I took a huge risk and applied for a position in Boston
Mm.
with the Boston Symphony Orchestra, and it was on outreach and diversity and inclusion kind of work, and I was like, oh my goodness, this is right up what I love. So
Yeah.
I applied for it as well and didn't hear back for like 6 months, and then like we went in another direction, which I kind of assumed. So I mean, like I put myself out there, but at the same time, it wasn't like I must do this, and I know I'm in a huge position of privilege because I was in a financial situation where I could make this decision.
Yeah.
Yeah, just take that time for yourself to heal and rest.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And a lot of people don't have that opportunity. And I did a lot of number crunching and budgeting to see if it was plausible that I do this. So no, there was no, and I am very much a type A personality. So I have always been the person that had the 1 year plan, the 5 year plan, the 10 year plan. And this is the first time in my life I have not had any plan.
That must have been quite the stretch.
Welcome to the
Um,
club.
it's not been as terrifying as I thought it would be. Oh, so I've just been kind of rolling with it, whatever opportunity presents itself, kind of deal. And it's worked out so far.
Yeah, congratulations. So take us through. So June, you finish June 1st. You take the summer and into the fall of October, really just to rest and heal. And then I guess just kind of pick it up from there. Um, where what happened after you felt, I guess, like recharged enough and kind of got your vitality back and really went in depth for some interpersonal healing. What was kind of your next step forward and where you wanted to put your heart of service?
So in trying to figure out what's important to me, what do I value, that kind of thing, I have a huge passion for nonprofits and people who have boots on the ground doing a lot of the hard work. Uh, like you said, when you introduced me, I am a co founder of Bridging Faith Gaps. And so I started doing more work with them. I was doing a lot of work beforehand, but just with the school schedule and after school rehearsals, I couldn't do tons of work. Like I could show up on our Saturday events, I could show up to our meetings, but I couldn't do a lot of the behind the scenes work. So I started doing that. And so I'm going to give a little background on Bridging Faith
Yeah.
Gaps, if you don't
Yeah.
mind. So Bridging Faith Gaps started in 22, fall of 22, because of the split in the Methodist Church between those who wanted a fully inclusive church and those that remained United Methodist versus those that did not want LGBTQ individuals to be ordained or have leadership positions in the church. So my church voted to remain United Methodist and be inclusive, which I'm thankful for. However, there wasn't an affirming space in Elbert County. And by affirming, I mean we see you for your whole person. We celebrate who you are and that you are made in the image of God, just like anyone else, kind of thing. And we needed a space in Elbert County that was fully inclusive and fully affirming, and that was safe. So our LGBTQ community could meet and get to know each other because it's not always safe here, unfortunately. So we started BFG is what we call it for short, not to be confused with Big Friendly Giant, the
The
book.
Roald Dahl book.
Yeah.
I love that book.
Yeah. Um, but BFG was started just kind of as a meeting space for LGBTQ individuals and their allies. And we just kind of started talking about ways we experience shame. We talked about ways we can be in community with each other and whatnot. And it was fun just to kind of meet and talk about things like that. But we had a meeting where we had a professor from the University of Georgia come in. Her name is Dr. Heather Padilla, and she works primarily in public health, public safety. But her job with the university is to go out into communities and address issues of public safety in particular. And we asked her, what do you see is lacking or needed in rural communities? And she started talking about the need for resources and access to food and clothing and that kind of thing. So we have a huge food bank within the Methodist churches here in Elbert County that gives boxes of food once a month. We also have another ministry that you can get food on Wednesdays and Fridays. But the problem with both of those is that you have to have transportation. And a lot of people in rural communities actually don't have transportation, nor is there public transportation available. So when we started talking to her about these needs that she sees throughout the state, this idea came into mind that we should develop a way to have a mobile resource trailer. And so we kind of shifted from just being a safe place for LGBTQ and allies to being missional minded as well, which of course fell into the love of social justice for me. So we partnered with a local group here in Elbert County who is LGBTQ, And they had reached out to several of the nonprofits here, and they had been turned down. They didn't want their donations or their food or clothing because they were LGBTQ. They reached out to us, and we said, absolutely, how can we make this partnership work? And it was really beautiful in that they invited us into their space, which does not normally happen. And we were able to talk to them about what we wanted to do and be involved with and our vision. And not only did they donate stuff to get us started, but a couple had a foundation, a family foundation, and they gave us a check for $10,000 to buy our first trailer,
Mm.
which is incredible, right? And so we bought a 20-foot trailer and had uh, shelving donated or bought by some of the individuals from this organization. And we started outfitting our mobile resource trailer, and it is full of hygiene products. So any soaps or shampoos or body wash, um, even things like toenail clippers and fingernail clippers or tweezers, fingernail files, that kind of stuff, any feminine hygiene products, diapers, both adult diapers and children's diapers. We usually have at least 4 different sizes of diapers on the trailer. And then also we have 3 racks of clothing that travel with us, and we'll pull it out of the trailer. And we wanted to keep things as client centered and client focused as possible. We didn't want to necessarily hand out bags of stuff because a lot of times, like with the food ministry I was talking about earlier, you just get a box of stuff. It doesn't necessarily have things that you need or things that you can use in it. Um, and it definitely does not keep in account any uh, allergens that you may have, right? So we wanted this to be an opportunity for people to come and go shopping and get what they need. So when someone comes up to the trailer, so we try to have trailer events about every other month. And so when someone comes up to the trailer, we greet them, we talk about uh, what our trailer has on it. And our rule is you take what you need and leave something for someone else. So there is no quantity amount per se, because we don't know if you're shopping for yourself or you're shopping for a house full of people. But we give you a bag and let you go shopping. And then you can come out. And sometimes we have food if it's been donated, but you can come out of the trailer and then to go through our clothing as well. And that has been incredible and a great opportunity for us to be involved in the community, and has also garnered lots of partnerships with other nonprofits, um, to the effect of we are now invited to other people's events to bring the trailer, which is a great partnership.
Yeah, and do you have a central meeting point? Because you said like transportation is the issue, so everyone knows like at this time, this day, outside of the events, like this is where the trailer's going to be to come get their stuff.
We do not have a central meeting point because we try to take it throughout the county.
Okay.
Mm.
So we have the county seat is Elberton, but we also have a small community called Bowman, and so we'll take it to Bowman occasionally. Um, there are different places within Elberton that we will go. We have, I'm gonna call them the unseen homeless population, because it's not like a lot of times when people think homeless, they think like a tent city or that kind of thing. Our homeless, majority of them stay in hotels. So we want to be close enough that the people from hotels can come and walk to the trailer. So sometimes that means it's going to be more on the south end of the county. But we also have had several events over at Blackwell Memorial Gym as well. So it just kind of depends on what's going on as to where we're located. But we have people that follow us. We always advertise that on our social medias
Okay, gotcha.
as well. Yeah.
No, and that makes sense because you kind of have to bridge, like the areas, where people are, and so if transportation is the issue, then that's kind of hence why you have the trailer, right? Is so that you can come to them,
Yeah.
and not everybody's going to be in the same place, right?
Yeah. Our goal for the future is to have a building that is more centralized that people can come to, but that requires money.
Yeah, that's a big project.
Yeah. And so our stuff for the trailer is housed at um, our local congregation and church. They let us use the basement for free.
That's awesome. So it's a nice partnership.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then so the other arm of what you guys are doing is focusing on a lot of the educational element behind social justice, right?
Yes. So we continue our monthly meeting, and those monthly meetings can kind of follow several different topics. Um, I did the previous 6 months, January through June, I did on pride and highlighting people who've made contributions to the greater humanity uh, and what they've done that identified LGBTQ. And then we ended that series in June with a Pride Jeopardy, which was super fun to play. Right now, we're doing a series on women's history because of uh, things that are happening politically right now, just to make people aware that uh, you do have voting rights, even though the SAVE Act is trying to be passed. So, what you can do to kind of protect yourself to make sure you maintain your voting rights. We've also done information on racial injustice. And this summer, I was talking about the book study earlier, but I led the book study on issues of race throughout America was kind of the theme of the book, but we talked about the issues of race here in Elbert County. And there are still major issues that we have to face. So we we are literally divided with a railroad track. And the white community lives on one side and the black community lives on the other side. Um, the black community really with the railroad track is cut off from, if there's a train passing through, the black community is cut off from the majority of town unless you go a long way around. So, there's still things within our community that need to be addressed in terms of racial issues. So, but we try to educate people about ways that they can have these conversations about why these issues exist. Um, and it's kind of interesting to get people's perspective on that, and because we have all sorts of generations. Even my mother comes to the BFG meetings.
Yeah, mom.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, so so we have, people that are in their 70s coming. We have people in their 40s come in. We have people in their 20s come in. So it's kind of nice to be able to have that big of a spread of people coming and supporting and learning. And
Yeah, I was able to attend the last event, and I was really surprised when I walked in at the number of people that were there. I had not expected, and that was just delightful to me.
yeah,
And the topic was on. Do you want to say what it was, Allie? Because you'll do a better job.
sure. So Amy came to our community chat, which is a new element of BFG this year. So the founder and I put these together because she has skills and strengths that I don't have, and I have skills and strengths that she doesn't have. So we just partner together. Works out really well. Uh, so we started these community chats to get people in the community who really want to make a difference in the community, um, together to talk about issues, but not just to get together and vent. Like, I never want it to be a venting session, but an educational session, in that when we come together to talk about these issues, we also need to be able to realize what we bring to the table, both in terms of the privileges we bring to the table and the armor that we bring and defensiveness that we bring to the table, and why that is. So, we've done 3 community chats. The first one was on diversity, equity, and inclusion, why it's important, but also why it's been under attack, and what are the benefits of having a DEI policy within your organization or your business. And then the next one was navigating hard conversations and the skill set you need in order to have hard conversations, but remain, I won't say unaffected by emotions, but be able to regulate your emotions.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people just blow up or get angry. So we um, wanted to teach, like, how do you approach this? What are some questions and skills that you can use and come to when you know you're going to have a difficult conversation? And then this last one that Amy came to was the armor we wear, how we respond to shame, and how to remove it, and why that's important for not only ourselves and our relationships with others, but our community at large. So it's been enlightening. I've loved teaching adults instead of teaching children,
Yeah.
which has also been a learning curve.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
uh,
But so well presented. I mean, your presentation
Thank
was
you.
just really extremely well done. It was laid out well, and then also just executed so well. And there was a really great conversation. I really appreciated the way that there was a meal, so we had that
Mhm.
shared feast element
Yeah.
that I think is really important for community,
Mhm.
and that actually you had uh, planned seating so that instead of people gathering, which we normally do, right, with the people we already know, but to be at a table with people that we don't necessarily know, and give us a chance to get to know new folks and have fresh
Yeah.
conversation.
Yes, Amy was at a very good table.
I was at a great table.
Yeah, but I know, like, I didn't really. You and I had communicated via email before that, but we had not spoken in person. And there's a lot of thought, because I do the table placements as well,
Uh-huh.
and there's a lot of thought about, one, I do want you to know somebody at the table, so I knew you knew Liz,
Yeah.
but I also want you to feel comfortable enough to share, because I'm intentional about giving table talk time.
Uh-huh.
And so, who can I put you around that's going to give you that sense of safety, but also allow you to speak and to have a voice at that table?
Mhm.
So there is a lot of thought that goes into table placements, that people don't realize that I fret over.
Well, I really
Um,
appreciate hearing that too. I mean,
yeah,
that's an amazing thing that you take the time and the attention to put on that. I think that's important.
yeah. One of the things that's important to us for the community chats is, yes, we want you to sit with people that make you feel comfortable, but we also want you to develop connection, so that if you uh, if you met somebody at your table and you've had this incredible conversation with them, and you need their help in the future, or you need to um, recommend someone to that organization, you have that connection.
Mhm.
So we're really intentional about building community as well as part of community chats. So,
Yeah, and just on that topic, I mean, not only did I meet you there and invite you to the podcast, but I also met someone at my
mhm,
table that I invited to a future podcast. So
yeah,
that was just really fantastic night.
You
And
have several people from your table that would make really good podcasts.
yeah, and then I just noticed, I shared this with Allie before, that when I woke up the next morning, there was just a sense of well-being that I felt. And I
Mhm.
woke up and I was like, "What is this?" And then I thought, "Oh, it's from being at that meeting because it really was fulfilling. It
I
was a
love that.
fulfilling experience, yeah. So there was just a sense of well-being that I really valued.
Yeah, that's awesome. Like a great way to build community in a very organic way. And just in the same way that you built and orchestrated your classroom, like taking a lot of the same, elements and knowledge and wisdom and bringing that into how to bring people together. But it's interesting because what you had mentioned before, while there is a lot of people showing up and a lot of support, you also got actual threats, going before your first meeting. I just wondered if you wanted to comment on that.
Yeah, so our first meeting, once again, we didn't really know what to expect. So our first meeting was publicized on where to meet and what time we were meeting. And unfortunately, we did receive threats of people who were going to show up and harass the people that were trying to attend. So we ended up canceling that first meeting. And so our meetings, we never publicize where our meetings are happening or when our meetings are happening, even though they meet the same time every month. But we, you have to have a connection to BFG. Like for our monthly meetings, the community chats are a little bit different. Um, our mobile resource trailer, of course, is different. But for our monthly meetings where we are trying to develop community and having a safe place, then you have to know somebody who is involved in BFG and have a personal invitation to that. Um, because we want people to be safe. We want people to feel safe. And that's not always, unfortunately, that has not always been the case. So we are very intentional about that now. So I hate that that still exists,
Yeah.
but also that's part of what we are trying to change. I think us having the mobile resource trailer and being in the community has helped that mentality a lot because people see the good that we're doing now. So um, if they're going to be bigoted and hateful, they can't fuss about the good work we're doing. So
Right.
that's been helpful. Um,
I'd actually like, if it feels okay, I'd like to go back to the topic of pride. Um, and I feel like this is, and kind of like you were saying before, like underrepresented. There's not enough knowledge of what this organization actually is beyond just a colored flag. And so, you know, if that's all I know about it, kind of take me through what you've discovered about it, its origin and history, and its impact on social justice today, and why we should why we should be informed and care about it.
yeah, the reason I wanted to do a whole series on pride for BFG is being located in a rural area really means lack of access. So it's one of, and I think this is where social media has helped, knowing that you are not alone, that there are people like you out there in the world. That is that is one of the perks of social media. I did not grow up with social media, so it was not. It was just something that was unknown. I didn't know what I didn't know, kind of mentality growing up. So I wanted to share that there has been LGBTQIA plus people throughout history.
Yeah.
So I wanted to take time to not only educate other LGBTQ persons, but also our allies because you don't realize. And unless you go hunting for this information, it's not readily available to you. So in January, I did a whole lesson just on LGBTQ terms and the different terms that are used um, and represented in the pride flag, but also the terms that are used within communities. Like, there are certain words that if you are an ally, you should not ever use. But if you're within the community, it is okay for you to use. There are words that are trying to be reclaimed by the community. Growing up, queer was a negative connotation. Well, now people use it as an identifying term because they're trying to take back that power. So I spent time unpacking those terms and teaching more people about terms. Indigenous people use a term called two-spirited that represent the masculine and female embodiment of people, which is really beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
But that is restricted to Indigenous people. Like, I can't talk about that in terms of my heritage. So just taking the time to share that and to teach people about that was so important. Then we did,
Can I interject and ask a question here?
yes,
What are
absolutely.
some terms, if I'm not in the community, what are some terms I should avoid and would be considered derogatory?
It, it depends on what gender you're talking about.
Okay.
Um, if you're talking about lesbians and you're not in the community, you should not really use the word dyke.
Yeah.
Yeah, no
Um,
kidding. Yeah.
um, if you are talking about males who are gay, there are a whole bunch of subsets of those. If you're not in the community, you should not use twink or bear. Those are the ones that are just coming off the top of my head. So, like I mentioned about Indigenous people, uh, we refer to two-spirited people as trans people, but two-spirited people within the Indigenous community are really celebrated and highlighted. But if you're not Indigenous, you don't need to use the phrase two-spirited. So
Mm-hmm.
um, most of it has to do with the subsets within the communities themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So um, those are the ones that are coming to mind off the top of my head. I haven't looked at those words in a long time.
Yeah, I know. I was asking you to recall
Yeah.
probably something you read 6 months ago, but I just thought it was
Yes.
important, for people to know like what terms are going to be considered offensive, and sort of what to
Yeah.
avoid in a manner of respect in regards to this issue.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's important if you're going to work with the community, then it's important to educate yourself about it. A lot of these terms, unless you're in the community, I don't know that you would know about them. So there's a little bit of leeway there, unless you're just absolutely going out of your way to be derogatory.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's easy to interpret, like once you're interfacing with someone, like just based on how they're saying
Yeah.
things.
Right. Um, so yeah, you want me to talk a little bit more about the other things?
Yeah,
That
because that was kind of
I
more
talked about?
pride. So some of the other social justice
Yeah.
elements you guys are working on.
So we, like I said, we're doing the women's rights kind of movement right now. Um, in the past, we've even looked at, in terms of race and reconciliation or racial inequality, we have looked at the government's involvement with the Black Panther movement, which was a really interesting conversation. There is a documentary called Judas and the Black Messiah about the Black Panther movement in Chicago and all the work that they were doing in terms of feeding people and education, and how the government uh, targeted the leader there.
Mm-hmm.
So we've spent time talking about that, um, and we've even talked about injustices that were done kind of locally. There's a museum in Montgomery called the Legacy Museum, and they've done a lot of research highlighting the lynchings that have taken place all throughout the United States. So if you go there, there's a memorial that has the name of every single person that was lynched
Mm,
in America on it.
Wow.
wow.
And it's also broken down by county. So you can go and find Elbert County and see the two names that are listed there. So even being willing to talk about some of the history that people want to forget or overlook is one of the things that we want to address as well. Um, so hard conversations, breaking down a lot of stereotype kind of conversations, being willing to address implicit bias type conversations as well.
Yeah, expand on that. And I get the sense it's like the bias that comes inherently from my own probably perceptions and beliefs, but maybe expand a little bit more about what that means and how that affects us.
Yeah, I actually love doing work around implicit bias because it means implicit bias comes in when we haven't done the work on ourselves to identify our natural biases. So, as a white woman, I generally prefer other white people. And so, when I meet someone who is black, what stereotypes am I just naturally bringing to the conversation? That's what I mean by implicit bias because they're inherent. They're so ingrained in our culture, they're so ingrained in our families that we don't even realize it.
Mm,
So, Harvard has done a great study on implicit bias, and they have a website that you can visit to see what your implicit bias are. And so I took the website specifically for the test specifically for racism, and it hurt my feelings, to be quite
mm,
honest,
uh,
because I had done all this work, right? I had done the work in seminary around race and reconciliation. I had gone to therapy to deal with some of my issues with race and racism, and having grown up in this community. Um, I had been intentional about breaking down barriers and stereotypes in my classroom, right? So I'd done all this work and it still came up that I moderately prefer white people. And I was like, you've got to be kidding me.
yeah.
Like, I was so upset about it.
Oh man.
Um, but knowing that and knowing that I have certain biases that I bring to conversations is really important. One of the other things that I'm doing right now outside of BFG is I'm working with the local African American History Museum, which we are so fortunate to have because they don't exist in small counties like us. And so I started meeting with them back in February and helping plan with for the Juneteenth celebration. Well, I learned real quickly as one of the only white people in the group that I was bringing certain biases to the table. And there are times that I need to sit down and shut up.
Mhm.
And it was really important. That was an important lesson for me. Um, Even having a conversation about what colors to use for Juneteenth was a time where I was like, okay, Allison, maybe you need to identify why this is rubbing you the wrong way. Um, and maybe you need to take a back seat to this. So I did all the graphic design and social media for the Juneteenth celebration. And so I had input in terms of what I was designing, but I also had to listen to other people where this is more of the African American history than my white history. So being able to sit in the uncomfortableness, I think, is important when it comes to implicit bias. Um, but Harvard has a whole bunch of tests, whether you want to do ageism, whether you want to do uh, people with disabilities. So there are a whole lot of ways that you can have implicit bias and be unaware by it. To go back to
Yeah.
the divisive concepts bill that Georgia passed, no employer can require teachers to do training on implicit bias anymore.
Mm.
And I just wonder how much implicit bias affects our classrooms.
Yeah.
Of course.
Yeah. So.
And that's where it becomes interesting where you said, you've ended up needing to reach out to um, public officials, kind of more than you thought. So, kind
Mm-hmm.
of going in that direction, because I know you've mentioned before, like a lot of these issues are systemic, right? Which means it's sort of rooted in institutions, perhaps even laws. Um, like you said, it's amazing that you actually have uh, a a building and a structure for honoring Black history. So,
Mm-hmm.
where do we go next in terms of rectifying this from maybe aside from just doing our own work and bringing more awareness to implicit bias, but when it comes to more like policy and if you were like a council person, how would you start to address this in Elbert County?
Hmm. So I do think it's amazing that we have a space for an African American museum. Um, it is owned by the county, and they allow the Jim Ree Museum is what it's called, but they allow the Jim Ree organization to rent the facilities, basically, and it's for very low cost. I think it's maybe like $1 a year or something like that. So the facility is being used. Um, I hope that partnership continues. Um, Given the current political climate, it makes me a little fearful
Yeah.
for it. Um, we have a lot of organizations and nonprofits in Elbert County that want to help identify and I'm going to use the word correct some of the systemic issues that are ongoing in Elbert County. If I were a city council person, uh, just this week they announced that they're doing community grants. If I had grants that were coming in that wanted to target some of these issues, I would specifically look for those and probably give them more money in order to do that. Um, I also think that just highlighting the work that's being done by a lot of our local nonprofits would be really beneficial. Uh, I wrote my very first letter to the editor for our local newspaper this summer because for the Juneteenth celebration, it's held on our square. The roads were not closed down. And so for me, this was a big, huge public safety concern because I literally saw children run across the road and not pay attention to traffic at all. So, my question became, are we putting uh, profits over people? Because the mayor had told me that the businesses didn't like it when we closed down the street because it affected their bottom line. Well, my response was there were only 3 businesses open, and 2 of them were restaurants, and the other had ice cream, and so they were benefiting from a hot June summer day in Georgia. Uh, they're
And there are many other events where the streets are shut down there.
right,
Yeah.
right. Um, so holding the same standard for everyone
Mm, yeah.
um, is very important. So I'm in a place where we were talking about peace earlier. I'm in a place where I feel like in order to maintain peace, I have to speak out against wrongdoings that I see. So I think not closing down the streets for Juneteenth. Did you not close down the streets because you were concerned about the businesses, or did you not close down the streets because it was a black event?
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, let's be honest
Call
and
it what it is.
transparent in that. So
No, it seems pretty clear. It's like you said, holding the same standard um, in regards to whatever the spirit of the event is, right? And like you said, it's like the reason for not doing so in the business complaining, that doesn't make any sense. Restaurants and an ice cream shop is only going to benefit if a bunch of people are outside and going to get hungry,
mhm.
Like that doesn't even make sense.
Yeah.
Um, so to a lay person, what is, if you could like instill um, in people something about what they can know or what they should care about, for someone who maybe isn't quite knowledgeable enough or doesn't have enough information to really be charged about this and have a willingness to want to institute change, like what might that be?
That is a question that I have been asking myself a lot with the apathy around
Mm-hmm.
me. Um, and I really think if you can have that kind of apathy, then you were definitely coming from a place of privilege.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
are you willing to take time to identify your privilege? And are you willing to take the privilege that's afforded you and help others with it? Um, I mean, that was a conversation I had with the other Juneteenth committee members. Is once it wasn't the street wasn't closed down, and we started asking questions. Um, Another member was like, "I'm going to write a letter to the editor, but it's not going to have the same impact that it would if Allie wrote it."
Mm-hmm.
And I said, "Well, I'll write one as well." Um, but part of that is because I know I do have privilege in terms of my family has been here for over 200 years. My mom taught school here. My dad owned a business here. My grandfather was on the board of education here. Like, I know my name and my relationships with people carry a lot of weight. I think that's part of the reason BFG has been successful. So, what kind of privilege do you have that can be used to benefit others? The other side of that, though, is also, have you done any work in empathy? What
Mm.
would you, what would this feel like to you if you didn't have these certain rights, or you didn't have these certain opportunities? This is, to be transparent here, this is a conversation, discussion that my dad and I had, because he grew up in poverty. He definitely had to work to get to be successful, to get to be a business owner. Um, and so he has the mentality that everybody should be able to pull themselves up by their bootstraps. And if you work
Yeah.
hard enough, it's going to come to you. And my conversation to him is, one, as a white man, you were more likely to get a loan from the bank to help buy your business. You've also um, had somebody in the family that was willing to be an investor because they had the financial capability to be able to do that. And if you look at, let's say, somebody your same age that wants to do the same occupation but is black, are they going to be able to get the same amount of loan from you? Probably not. Are they going to have someone in their family that can be an investor and have the financial stability to do that? Probably not,
Mhm.
because they haven't been afforded the same opportunities. So, you know, taking the time to try to understand another perspective is very important. And I don't know that a lot of people want to do that. And I'm not, and this is also something that I've come in contact with, is I'm not asking you to feel bad that other people didn't have.
Right.
Like, people want to take on, what am I trying to say? People are wanting to take on that mantle of, oh, I have to feel remorse for having these opportunities. I'm not saying feel remorse for it. I'm saying work to make equality and equity happen,
Yeah, I think that's a really important thing to state. There's a big
right?
difference. Yes.
I can't go back and change the past. So, like,
Right.
feeling bad about what happened in the past isn't going to really benefit anyone. But what are you doing now in the current time, the present, to make things more equitable for people? That's what I'm saying. And I don't know that people want to delineate between the difference of those things.
Yeah, and I think the distinction that you made, like without empathy, then you're going to have
Hmm.
apathy. So it's one thing not to know, and then it's another thing not to care, and then it's another thing not to do
Yeah.
anything about it. And so it's like, how do you? And I think a big part of it is like inspiration, right? And creating opportunity. You know, it's one thing. It's like, well, I don't know how to
Yeah.
support and make this equitable. And it's like, well, show up on Saturday at this place and help me give out
Yeah.
stuff from the trailer. Show up to this meeting and learn about your implicit bias. You know, and I think that's what's so important about the role in that your organization is playing, is it's giving opportunity for people in these different aspects to be able to learn and grow and have opportunity to put into action how we can help sort of balance the scales and create an equitable sense of opportunity regardless of all these aspects like, sex and gender and race and class and all these other ways in which we divide people into
Hmm.
categories.
I have been thinking about there's a Latinx community here in Elberton, I know.
The other largest group we have is a Latin Hispanic community, and we have tried to make some connections uh, with the Latin community in order to get them more involved in uh, community chats in particular. A good many people from the Hispanic community do come to the trailer events, so we love that. Um, one of the things,
Do you think some aspect of that is the language
well, I was
barrier?
going to say, one of the things that we try, yes, yes, but one of the things that in the trailer we have instructions for the trailer and welcoming to the trailer in English, Spanish, and French.
Oh,
Um,
nice.
because we're very intentional about that, but no one in our group speaks Spanish fluently. So, so there is a barrier there.
There's an opportunity
Yeah.
for someone.
Uh, we also have a large Haitian community here that came in with one of the chicken plants. And so having someone speak Haitian Creole would also be beneficial. Uh, And so when we advertise our events, we definitely advertise in English and Spanish. Like any of our big events are always advertised in both. And then we last year, woo, thank God for Google Translate, because we also put it out in Haitian Creole. And the Haitian Creole population is also one of our largest homeless populations.
Mm. Well, with that, do you want to take it into what you guys are doing as we get closer to the Thanksgiving holiday season?
Absolutely. So one of our biggest, not one of, the biggest community event that we host every year is a community Thanksgiving meal. And so this will be our third year hosting it. And we are so excited about it because we have set a goal for ourselves to feed 1,000 people. So the first year we did it, we had a goal of 500. Last year we had a goal of 750, and we actually ended up doing 789 plates last year. So this year we're setting a goal of 1,000.
Wow.
Um, and it is a wonderful time of community because we host it at Blackwell Community, um, Blackwell Memorial Gym, and we partner with lots of different organizations. We partner with some recovery organizations, Celebrate Recovery, Life and Recovery, Mother to Mother, all come in. And Mother to Mother, their women actually helped serve last year, but they offered a free Narcan training for anybody who wanted to take that, and offered free Narcan for anybody who wanted it. Uh, which, if people don't know,
What is Narcan?
Narcan is a drug that will help with any overdose. So if
Okay.
you have a drug overdose, if you can get Narcan in their system, that usually gives at least 30 more minutes to get the ambulance
Mm-hmm.
to them, to start flushing their
Yeah.
system. It actually blocks the neuroreceptors for opioids, which is fascinating. Um, so, a free Narcan training. We had community partnership come in and sign people up for free literacy resources for any kids uh, from 0 to 5 years old. We had the SWAT Foundation come in and give out over 100 toys to children, which is incredible. And then, of course, we have our trailer set up with all the trailer stuff and clothing and any other home goods that people have donated throughout time.
Mm.
This year, we've partnered with even more other nonprofits that are going to be there, and
Oh.
we are also hosting our first ever community worship service. So we're excited about that and bringing in people from all sorts of walks of faith and denominations and putting them all together to worship and
And
preach.
I heard that a special someone's going to be giving their first sermon.
Well, it's not going to be my first sermon, but I am preaching. I am preaching, so I'm excited about it. The sermon title is going to be "The Soul of the Community."
Mm. And how many volunteers do you think you guys are going to need in order to be able to get out 1,000 plates?
So last year we had over 80 volunteers. So between setup and breakdown and serving, uh, we're probably going to have anywhere from 80 to 100 volunteers this year, which we are very excited about. We BFG takes care of the turkey and the dressing, and then we have other churches and individuals that will take care of the green beans and mashed potatoes and rolls and pound cake. That's what we serve. So it's a full, hot Thanksgiving meal. We encourage anybody to come in from the community. It's completely free um, to eat, and we also ask our volunteers to eat because we do not want to create a dichotomy between the us versus them. So we want everybody to be in community together and sit down and break bread together, and it's a beautiful opportunity for people to do that.
Yeah, that sounds awesome, and it's also making me now very hungry.
Well, it almost is lunchtime.
And then maybe if you want to just give us a brief description about what you guys are covering in the podcast, the I Just Don't Understand podcast.
Yeah. So AJ and I started the I just don't understand podcast back in January. And part of that, we had talked about a podcast for a long time, but part of that came after the election. And I was talking to her, and I kept going, I just don't understand. I just don't understand. I said, well, I think that's going to have to be our podcast title. So we are we are now recording our second series, and we're very excited about it. But our first series kind of looks at um, that intersectionality of rural culture, because that is very different than urban, uh, Southern culture, and then how religion uh, plays a part in all of that. And so the first series, we talk about Southern hospitality, the the good things and the pitfalls of it, and we also move into radical hospitality, which is something I'm passionate about um, because it takes away some of the social expectations of Southern hospitality. And then we also examine ways people experience shame in the church and then what you can do about that. And then the second series that we've started recording is why we believe what we believe. And so we're kind of unpacking the why we believe certain things in the Christian faith tradition, and is that more has that been more influenced by society or biblical tradition, and why that is.
Oh, that's fascinating.
So it's I've really loved it and enjoyed it. Um, it's been really interesting to get people's perspectives on it um, because a lot of people in our community that have listened to it have just never thought of things like this before. So it's
That's great work.
it's been fun.
Amy, anything else on your mind that you want to ask Allie while we have her?
Do want to say that I've learned so much today, Allie. You've really taught me a lot of things that I didn't know about the area and about just a lot of things. And I really appreciate and value all that you've shared. And thank you for telling, so much of your story too. And then also, just really educating us on so many different things.
I've really enjoyed our conversation.
Yeah, me too. So I'm just going to do a brief closing, and then we can chat a little bit more thereafter. So if you're in a space to do so, as we close, go ahead and bring your eyes to a close and bring your body into stillness. And just taking this pause here to support the process of integrating that which we've received, noticing how it has stirred us and how it's probably given us something to consider and some information to chew upon. And from here, inviting a deeper breath in. And exhale, releasing. Thank you so much, our special guest, Allie Dye, for being so forthcoming and vulnerable and being a fierce advocate for those that do not have their full voices, and for your immense amount of service in the public school system, impacting a lot of kids' lives along the way. Thank you so much to my host, co-host Amy Bear, for helping us hold the space and allowing this, beautiful transmission to come through. Thank you so much to all of our faithful listeners. And we're closing out here for episode 11. Hope everyone has a wonderful day, and see you on the next one.